Welcome, class, to another discussion we're going to have. And we welcome back Greg Heilman to class. And he spoke to us previously about what he does in his fandom, what he does with the company, and some other topics. But this time, he's back to talk to us about musicals and Disney musicals, both on stage, on Broadway, off Broadway, and the products that we see on Disney Plus, as far as some of the more recent ones, Hamilton, the animated classics, the Disney Channel movies. And so I wanted him to come back and talk about this topic because I'm really, really excited about it. And I know a lot of people have gotten into watching more of the musicals when or after Disney Plus has launched. And another thing that Greg does that I wanted him to be here specifically for this conversation is he's co-host of a podcast called Heilman and Haver, where him and his co-host talk to people who work in stage and screen production about what they do and kind of how to hone a person's craft if they're wanting to work in those spaces. And so that's enough introduction from me. I'll turn it over. Greg, welcome to class. If you could recap briefly your kind of introduction to Disney, what you do with Disney, but then walk us through what Heilman and Haver does to start the conversation.
Sure. Well, first of all, Cody, thanks for having me, and thanks to your class for giving us the time here. Always happy to chat with folks about Disney and stage and screen and things like that. So at Disney, so I've been with Disney. It'll be 5 years next week, I think, or later this week even. And I am with Global Information Security. I'm a program manager there. So we manage the data, make sure your personal data is secure and nobody can, hack into the company, that kind of stuff. So that's what our group does from a functional perspective. Always been a Disney fan since as far back as I can remember. First trip to Disney World in '76, and have been there, a number of times. Recently moved out to the West Coast, so I've been more Disneyland centric, you could say, but still get back to Florida. Just huge fan, as we've kind of touched on before. One of my other interests has always been kind of entertainment from stage and screen. That's probably why fed into the whole Disney thing as well. When we moved out here to Seattle, I had the opportunity through my son to get into some local regional theater, and really always been a fan but never had acted or anything like that, and I've been doing that for probably the last 4 to 5 years as well. And I've been in a few Shakespeare things. I've been in Mary Poppins as George Banks, the father, and I've really enjoyed that. One of the shows I was in was an Agatha Christie show, Appointment with Death, with a fellow actor, Matt Haver, who turns out lives basically across the street from me. Didn't realize that. But as quarantine went on, we weren't acting. We could kind of sense that people were just looking for something to fill the gap. So Matt and I decided, why don't we just start a podcast? We'll bring on. I will start by bringing on some directors and actors and people that are involved in the regional theater that we've worked with. Talk to them about directing stage for plays, musicals, adapting stories for stage and things like that. And over the last 4 months, I guess, we started in October. We're on episode. We're scheduling episode 20 for a few weeks from now. We've gotten a great diversity of guests from both Broadway and from Hollywood, as well as the local people. We had somebody who used to be my family doctor back in Pennsylvania, who is now a doctor for the Actors Fund on Broadway. We've had a Turner Classic Movies author. We've had Danny Bilson, most recently screenwriter for The Rocketeer. So yeah, it's been a way to really kind of scratch the itch of not being able to do anything during quarantine.
And one thing I really like about listening to those episodes is when you two talk to people, you talk from the perspective of a fan, but you're also talking from the perspective of someone who wants to learn more and wants to hone their craft. And I think a lot of, I think really, really good podcasts do that, where they just want to, they want to learn more and they want to have interesting conversations. And every person that you talk to becomes this new interesting conversation to reflect on. And so I've really, really enjoyed that aspect of it. The As far as acting during quarantine, um, there have been some things that I know theaters have tried to do, whether it's like Zoom recordings and they record it and then they show it. Some others have even done like more radio style dramas and things like that. Have you seen things that, or I guess, what have you seen that's worked for theaters and actors to do during quarantine? And is there something that seems to have worked the best or that people like?
I think from the actor's perspective, one thing Matt and I did actually before we started the podcast was organize some of our fellow actors and just did some reads of some stories. We did Glengarry Glen Ross, and we did War of the Worlds, just yeah, and just over Zoom. And it was it was fun to do that. Obviously, nothing beats doing things in person, but then we started, some of our guests were actually started theater companies that were dedicated to
Mhm.
virtual theater shows. And I think what we've seen is that there's a an appetite for you know costuming and doing all this stuff even over Zoom, and those seem to work. I think it's just people want to see a well-run show. I think
Mhm.
that's really what it is if you put some organization behind it, and you don't have to have fancy costumes, if you make an effort to kind of costume up and get into character and play it like you're on stage but over Zoom, then I think it's something that works. We saw the Actors Fund did Ratatouille the musical
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
January as a benefit, and that was really kind of an informal thing. It was kind of pre-recorded and then put all together, and that worked. So I think if you put some care into something and that shows. I think that's what people a lot of times like about theater anyway, is because it's a group of folks that really care about what they're doing and present a good show. So I think that works. I think some of it we'll probably even see stick around after we're done with COVID. Um,
Well, and that's kind of what I was going to ask next is, what are some of the things that will stick around after it's safe to go to theaters? And there's also a caveat to that I've had several conversations with people about when it's safe to do things, whether that's go to sporting events, go to movie theaters, go to theme parks, go to live plays. And but we also have to take into account that when people feel safe going back, and that's different for everyone.
mhm.
I mean, this is people have said it much better than I have, but this is a traumatic experience that people are still in. And so, like, kind of what is, we don't know the impact on people, and that means we don't know the impact on, like, when they will return, if they will return to what they formerly were doing pre-pandemic. And so what do you think some of the things will be that will stick around when it's, I guess, quote unquote safe or safer to go back to theaters?
Yeah, I think you're going to still see some people doing um, virtual auditions, because I think you can do um, uh, at least a part of the audition process over Zoom.
Hmm.
There's certain things you're not going to pick up from somebody over a camera that's not in person. But I think you're still going to see some of that. I think you'll still see people are now playing around with the technology enough that they're becoming amateur, almost filmmakers. And I
Mm-hmm.
think you're going to see some more of that. And I think, TikTok and things like that help that as well. Everybody's making videos on their phone. And I think you're going to still see some virtual shows. I think that one of the benefits, and we talked to a couple of our guests about this, a benefit of a virtual show over a live show is if you don't have the time commitment to be somewhere
Mm-hmm.
for auditions and things like that, say you don't have a lot of business travel, you're traveling, but you still have the opportunity to participate in a show if it's over Zoom versus because you can't be there. You can't dedicate the time or commit to
Mm-hmm.
something in person. So I think there's still going to be a certain amount of these virtual shows and virtual kind of table reads and things like that. I think theaters are not going to open until they feel like it's completely safe. I don't think anybody wants to be the instigator of a super
Yeah.
spreader kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think I trust that um, Broadway's not going to open until they feel it's safe, and regional theaters the same. And of course, regional theaters are I mean Broadway's struggling. Everybody's struggling,
Yeah.
economically, but um, if we can get through this, and we're actually, Matt and I have a meeting with one of our local theaters on Wednesday to discuss some ways to raise funds with virtual shows and things like
Okay.
that, even if it's doing a show with an empty audience and streaming it,
Mm-hmm.
no audience members, but we're doing it on stage and making sure all the protocols are in place, but streaming it, because you can get plays with licenses for virtual or streaming licenses versus in-person shows. So there's now some interesting licensing that
Yeah.
you can get, some more flexible licensing you can get with some of these shows.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it's really great that you two are doing that to try to help out, not only be able to to act again and be able to participate, but just the ability to help the theaters stay open and theater owners in these times. From a fan perspective, from a consumer perspective, do you think the virtual shows have added to the number of people who could be introduced, excuse me, to live theater, um, or do you think that's helped, or do you think that it's just kind of what needs to be done right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think off the my gut tells me it's more of what has to be done right now, that the
Okay.
audience for the virtual shows is probably a subset of the audience that's going to go to the live shows, because you've got to be online to be aware of them and things like that. So I think that it's more of um, serving the audience that's missing the live shows rather than introducing musical theater too. And I'm not saying it's not happening, because share, and if you like Ratatouille and somebody shares Ratatouille or whatever it is. But yeah, I think it's more of catered to the people that are missing the live theater experience.
And so by that same token, like you don't think that virtual shows will necessarily take the place of live theater performances unless there are situations where like a live theater has to doesn't it's not financially viable for them to stay open because of everything that's happened.
I think live theaters eventually should get back to, all things economically being equal, should get back to where they were before. And I think virtual shows would be something that people would do in addition
Okay.
to that. As a way to, they don't some a group of people don't have a current a show that's running currently. Maybe they get together and do a virtual show or something like that, or
Yeah.
it's an additional offering by a theater. But I don't think it's going to take the place of live theater.
Yeah. And I really do. You mentioned something I like. You mentioned about getting licenses to do streaming. I like the idea of we live outside of Memphis, Tennessee, and there's great theater here, and there's great theater houses here, and then there is, like, in downtown, it's called the Orpheum here. That's where, like, the Broadway Across America tours come. But there's all these other great regional um, theaters and houses as well. And I like the idea of, even if there is a live show with an audience, that it's then also the ability to be streamed so that people can watch. For instance, you know, living in Tennessee, I could watch, if you all do something in the Pacific Northwest. And I really like that idea that, and again, that is some coming from someone who grew up watching, going to theaters, watching musical theater, never participated in it myself, but am a big fan, and I very much appreciate that. Again, I'm not sure, like you said, if it would introduce people to it, but it's a cool option to have there. Um,
Sure. Yeah.
so to shift focus, what we're going to talk about, um, for the rest of the time, is about musicals, and the Disney musicals that, people have come to love. They started with the animated classics, because that's what Disney started with, was the animated movies, and which turned into the classics. But now we have a whole range of, there's Disney Broadway, there's the shows in the theme parks, the shows on the cruise lines, which are such high quality that, people who've been on cruise lines say you feel like you're watching a Broadway show. We have the Disney Channel movies that have been made. We still have the animated classics that have been made. And more recently, because of the launch of Disney Plus, we have the ability to watch some of those stage productions that have been pro shot as stage productions. And we have the option to watch that. And then in some cases, also the theatrical movies that have been made from musicals. So I guess let's start at the beginning with the animated musicals and animated classics. And why do you think people are so drawn to musicals, and what makes musicals work so well, starting with animation?
Well, I think part of it goes back to, and we had a professor of psychology a couple weeks ago on our podcast, Annabelle Cohen from Prince Edward Island, to talk about what it is about music in movies that really speaks to us at kind of that base level.
Mhm.
And I think that's part of it. When you have something that's visual, but it's accompanied with music done in a good way, it's something that just sticks with you, and just even they did studies on infants and infants with visuals versus visuals with music, and there was a different response. But I think it's a couple things. It's the that music piece of it. It's the singing. We all kind of sing, whether we're good or not, and we can relate to it. It's a way to, and what's the line from Teen Beach movie? About it's an inefficient way to move the story along. I think they were joking about it, but
Yeah,
it is
yeah.
a song can move a story along
Hmm.
in a much quicker way than drawing out the particular scene. So it's a way to kind of shorten a movie but still get a full story
Hmm.
in there. Some of those original animated classics were, an hour long, hour
Hmm.
15 minutes, really super short compared to movies today, especially. But so I think there's that. There's also, and I've been thinking about this, what's the attraction just overall through the years with movie musicals and things. It's also makes Broadway-ish shows accessible. It's not easy or not cheap to get a Broadway
Yeah.
ticket, even with a touring company. Um, it's not cheap, but having it in a movie with that musical makes it more accessible. So I think it's just a combination of those three things makes it work.
And the students in the class, they watched the documentary Howard, talking about Howard Ashman, and in that he talks about how musicals really, like the animation is a great place for musicals. And I think the sentiment is, people when they can't express their emotions another way, they start singing. And I think that that really does resonate with people. Like you said, people, we all sing in some way, whether it's just, we're singing in the car to ourselves, or we sing to kids or family or things like that, or the people who are very, very talented and are singing for all of us to hear and enjoy.
Yeah, and to his point with the animation, I think I always use the example of Let It Go, in
Mhm.
Frozen. I think in and of itself, Let It Go is an okay song. It's probably a good song, but as soon as you put that with that animation
Mhm.
sequence where she's going up the hill, and just that together is makes it, you know, it's synergistic,
Yeah.
synergistic. It makes it definitely greater than it makes the song better, makes the animation better. It's animation is a great fit for this.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people um, remember life events through music. Whether it's popular culture music, top 40 music, different genres. I think, that when people hear songs, it takes people back to a particular time, um, in their lives of what they were doing, what they were experiencing at that time. And I also I find great value in that sentiment that people bust out into song when they kind of don't know how to express themselves otherwise. I think that's something really powerful that draws people in, even if they don't realize maybe it's drawing them in. That there's something about music that works in our psyches, to remind us of events or put us in different places. It's its own diversion that you could literally sit in a room, listen to a song, and get lost in that song, and kind of transport yourself to a different place, which I think is really, really cool. Um, with Broadway musicals, um, some of the big Disney hits, um, The Lion King, Aladdin, um, Mary Poppins, Newsies. What what about those musicals, or I guess what about the stories, made them translate so well from some of them animation, some of them the movies, to Broadway productions, and then the process of the company added songs to that. They added content, to fill up a Broadway show. What do you think made those so popular?
Well, I think first of all, the story is, and everything with Disney always comes back to story. It always starts with story and ends with story. And I think that's really, those stories were structured in such a way that they really lent themselves to, a Broadway kind of show. And from the start, if we're talking about this kind of second um, generation, I guess, of Disney classics, starting with Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and all of these, having people like Ashman and Menken, who come from the stage, having had done Little Shop of Horrors and some other things, um, didn't hurt. Having Broadway style songs made it easily translatable to the stage. Now, yes, they added songs, and I know Aladdin the musical is more along the lines of the plot that um, Menken and Ashman had wanted, with adding um, the relationship between Aladdin and his mother and things like that. So it's a deeper plot because it's longer. So they've taken kind of that base story, and they've made it deeper and more mature almost,
Mm-hmm.
by adding songs to it. Um, it's Lion King. The great thing about Lion King was they kind of innovated in the way they presented it. So it's added another dimension to it
Hmm.
by the the lion heads and the puppets and things like that that they used. But I think it comes down to just the way the stories were structured and the type of music used in the movies made them really easily uh, Broadway translatable, I guess you
Yeah,
could say.
yeah. And I mean, one of the Disney Broadway musicals that I absolutely love is Lion King, because I think I've seen it maybe 3 times, and every time that first number starts, and the way that the musical starts, and the way, I don't want to give it away for people who haven't seen it entirely, but the way that the actors and actresses enter into the musical is just phenomenal. And
Mhm.
like you said, they really innovated the way that they did that, and they innovated new tech, included new technology. Um, because I remember hearing when that was being developed, thinking, how are they going to portray there's not a human in this animated movie at all. How are they going to portray all of these animals? I think they did it
Oh yeah.
masterfully. I mean,
And then the kind of things they did, and then you see in Frozen when you have an Olaf and a Sven, right? It's just kind of the next natural progression of
mhm,
of using that. The one wouldn't have been able to do without the other. One thing I will say is I always find it interesting that given the soundtrack between the Broadway show and the movie, I always prefer to listen to the Broadway soundtrack
mhm,
for for all of the shows from Little Mermaid to even Frozen.
mhm.
But I know because of the original are different songs, but the the Broadway voice quality is just a little bit different than the folks that get to do the movies usually,
Yeah,
which I always find a little bit more enjoyable. Being a musical theater fan, I think
yeah.
probably doesn't hurt there.
Well, and so on that note, um, do you think the do you have a preference between seeing something on Broadway and seeing something that maybe is a state is a theatrical adaptation? Um,
Yeah, I definitely I prefer, and I would love to see more shows that are done like um, Newsies and Hamilton and the new Newsies that you obviously have the old original movie, um, but things that are recorded on on stage,
mhm,
the stage version of them rather than a film adaptation. Um, though film adaptations aren't bad. I mean, Sound of Music is phenomenal. There's a lot of really good ones. You and I were talking before about Greatest Showman, which is
mhm,
a really good and enjoyable, musical. But that was obviously written for the screen, not for the
yeah,
stage.
yeah,
So, but as far as something that's written for the stage, I would prefer to see it on the stage.
okay. And that was one of the things that when I found out Hamilton had been purchased by Disney, and I remember thinking, this, how are they going to take this particular production and turn it into a movie? And maybe that will happen in the future. But then when I learned that no, it was pro shot and it's going to be the stage production, that made me really, really happy, because Hamilton was, still will be, a ticket extremely hard to get. And as you mentioned earlier, expensive for people to be able to go and enjoy that, which is why I loved that stage production was added to Disney Plus. The same thing with Newsies, and I've heard there's a potential of other Broadway shows that will have been pro shot that will be appearing on Disney Plus, not necessarily the adaptation to the film format.
Yeah, and what they did, obviously they recorded the shows live, but then they came back in and did some close up
Hmm.
face shots and things like that. Because that's the one thing, depending on where you're sitting in the theater. If you're in the back of the theater, you're watching kind of
Yeah.
that overall presentation. If you're in the front seat, the front, you're watching facial expressions and things like that. So the nice thing about doing the movies that way is you get a little bit of both. You get
Hmm.
those panned back shots where you can see the company doing the ensemble dance numbers, things like that. But then you also will get, a close up on Leslie Odom Jr. when he's
Hmm.
singing something, which is, great to watch, or whichever. Yeah.
Yeah. And so how do you know how long that takes? What the effort is on that? I mean, how many different shows are they having to record to get all of those shots? Because one thing about live theater is it is live. Every performance is different. And so you go on a Thursday night, that's going to be different from the
Hmm.
performance when you go on a Friday night. And so you kind of have this almost hybrid model now that it's live on stage, but there is able to be some kind of selective editing or things like that. So do you know what the effort is behind all of that?
Yeah, so they did. I know Hamilton and I think Newsies was similar. It was over a 4-day period,
Okay.
maybe 5. But what they did was they started, I think, on a Saturday and recorded every show Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Um, and then what they did was during the time, so if there was a Monday evening show, Monday afternoon, they'd have the cast come in and do those close-up shots.
Okay.
Um, so it was a short period, but just a few days. But the interesting thing is for both, they had to bring the original cast back because it had been a while since. Well, not Hamilton. I'm sorry. Hamilton was, I think, the last day or last week.
Yeah.
The original cast was in
Yeah.
place. Newsies was. It had been a little while since the original cast was involved, so they bring um, uh, the original cast members back to Jeremy Jordan and those guys to come back and join the touring company. I think it's the majority of it's the touring company, but they had those few principal actors come back. So there was a
Okay.
challenge there. But yeah, it was like a 4 or 5 day process.
So when they do the close-ups, is that is that during a show, or are they essentially putting on a show with no one in the audience for the primary purpose of doing those close-ups?
Exactly. Yeah, it's
Okay.
just they're doing a scene, they'll do a song, and they'll just do a bunch of close-ups and almost as
Okay.
if they're doing a scene in a movie.
Okay. And because I think maybe from the actor's perspective, it seems like if you know it's being filmed over a 3 or 4 day period, um, there's a little less pressure on one particular performance, because if you're doing everything in one performance, then if you mess up in that performance, well, that's what's there for posterity's sake. The Whereas if you go over a 3 or 4 day period, you may not know which take is being used until you see the final product.
Right, right.
Um, which we did get with Hamilton. We got all of the memes about uh, King George and but his close up shots and
Oh,
singing and
the
everything. Yeah,
spitting and all that. Yeah.
and and I'm a huge fan of Goff. That that's kind of his responses to that and everything also. But um, so then taking something from the stage and turning it into a movie theater production, what is that process like? I mean, because you watch some of these stage productions, and it, for me at least, it just hurts to try to wrap my head around how do they portray this on the screen.
Yeah, and it's always, I mean, you've always got to pull songs because there's, what, 20 songs in a musical
Hmm.
maybe, and the musicals are each, I'm trying to think, an hour and a half, maybe 3 hours of showtime, between 2 and 3 hours of showtime, with the intermission and all that. But
Hmm.
but obviously you have to tell a story differently with a camera because there's more around. We talked about the facial expressions and things like that. there's a lot more of that nuance that you get in a film that you have to work on. Plus, there's not as much real estate because you don't want to have an ensemble dance scene that takes up a huge screen and the
Yeah.
people are small. You look at for instance, La La Land.
Hmm.
At the beginning of La La Land, they had that sequence in the highway where they've got all these people dancing and you're moving the camera in and out, but really it's a sequence of just individual shots that are then edited together because you can't get the close-ups of the entire ensemble doing
Yeah.
everything they want, all at the same time. So it's uh it's a challenging process to kind of bring that same kind of feel. It's going to be different, and it's going
Hmm.
to be toned down musically, but yeah, I know that is it Kenny Ortega is probably the one of the best film choreographers around. I think there's Mandy Moore too, not the singer Mandy Moore, but the choreographer Mandy Moore. Um, but they're two of the best at doing things for film, choreography wise, that have a different skill set than if you're doing it on on stage because it's different.
Yeah. And the lyrics and singing, it seems like a lot of that would be you're you are singing in a sound stage, or I'm sorry, you're singing in a recording studio. And then that is because especially I keep thinking of scenes where people are walking and maybe it's splicing between three and four different people and they're telling the story similar to Into the Woods, like the beginning of Into the
Mhm.
Woods, where they're talking about the different things that they do and introducing the different characters. So I imagine, is that the process for something like that, that it's first recorded, and then when you go through and what you see on screen is those people are singing, but their voices are being covered up by their previous recording.
Yeah, it's more often than yeah, they're either lip syncing or singing while they're doing it. The recording from the recording studio is what's used. The only exception was when they did Les Mis a couple of years ago. Everybody did the singing there live
Okay.
on camera. That was the exception though. But yeah, it's and then you do a scene and you'll sing along to your recording, and then it's obviously the film editor that makes sure that everything seamlessly goes from one to the other. When you talk about a great example is what you had, Into the Woods in the beginning, where they're switching back and forth between all the characters.
Yeah. And one of the things, we got into a conversation with some of the students got into a conversation about stage to movies, and Into the Woods came up, and someone said that it's a very dark play. It's a very dark story. And I thought about it that, I had been looking forward to watching Into the Woods. It I forget when it actually dropped on Disney Plus, but it had been listed on Disney Plus for about a year before that, seemingly. And so I had been waiting for this, and I had been listening to the soundtrack because I've never seen a stage production of it. And at the end of the movie, I remember when James Corden's character, and Anna Kendrick, they kind of share a scene, and everybody's walking off. I remember thinking, well, what happened to uh, James Corden's character's wife? And I remember, oh yeah, yeah, she didn't make it out of the movie. She didn't make it out of the woods, and so it's like is there is a movie production of a stage play, um, is there something, what gets lost between a stage production when you turn it into a movie besides just some of the songs and context and things?
Yeah, that's good question. I think there's some of the sincerity that gets lost. And I think that's, when you're a singer or performer on Broadway, you're doing so much acting with your voice,
Mm-hmm.
that provides the emotion and depth and really the background of your character, all of that is contained in the way, not just the way you sing, the way you deliver. And I think there's a lot of that dimension that gets lost when you make a film. Now, you through cinematography and things like that, you can counteract that or balance that out. But I really think you lose a lot of that depth of character that's performed through the act of singing
Okay.
when you go to the movie.
And is there, and we can stick to Disney, but you could expand beyond Disney as well. Is there a particular musical you think has done the best job of being converted from stage to the movie theater?
Oh, good question. I think I think they did a really good job with Into the Woods. Honestly, because and I think the length of it kind of shows too. I
Mhm.
don't think um, they really you really lost too much of that. Um, Obviously, you can't Hamilton and Newsies, since it's really the stage show, you really can't say much there. It'll be interesting once In the Heights comes out.
Mhm.
Um, to see what they do with that, because I think there's more of a I think now you probably can get away with less. I mean, meaning that you're going to hold these movies to a higher standard because of things like Hamilton
Mhm.
and things like that. But boy, Into the Woods might be well. I'm trying to think, because if you go back to Music Man and um, those musicals that they had back then, I don't know that any of them I would prefer the movie to the musical. Um, yeah, I'll say yeah, Into the Woods. I think maybe the
Okay.
best one that I've seen that's been adapted like that.
Well, and then I want to flip it around and talk about, to some there is a preference of seeing the movie theater theatrical experience than the live theater experience. I'm aware of that, but there are sometimes the stories, um, for me at least, I have been able to pick up more of the story from the movie theater version and the home theater version than the live theater. And in particular, I'm thinking, you brought up Music Man. The first time I saw Music Man was the movies. I saw the movie The Music Man, and this was so long ago. I was so young. I didn't even know it was a stage production. I and when I was growing up, we would go to these productions on. I grew up in Texas, and we would go to productions on Galveston Island, and it was an outdoor amphitheater. And I remember one year going, and it was going to be The Music Man. And I remember thinking, wow, they made that movie into a stage production. Like, not grasping that, no, it was actually the other way around. So like that movie, I saw that movie before the stage production, and it helped me understand the stage production. Chicago actually is the musical, and it's not Disney, but it's the musical that I point to as, if I had not seen the movie first, if I had seen the stage production, I'm not sure I would have understood the whole story because of the way it was shot in the movie and the way things were staged in the stage production. So have you ever come across something like that, that there's actually, I guess, more of the story comes through when you watch in the movie theater?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think of movies that I've seen before the stage show. Little Shop of Horrors is probably one that I saw the movie first. Um, yeah, and a lot of the yeah, I would that's a good question, because I'm trying to think of. Um, hmm. There's a different, yeah, because there's a different pace when you watch a lot of these on stage,
Hmm.
and I think there's a lot of, I mean, even Aladdin. I think there's some of Aladdin that I might not have gotten if I hadn't
Hmm.
seen the movie first, because especially things when they're running around the market, things happen so quickly.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I don't know that there's any that would match up with your example of Chicago, but there are some pieces of shows that I think that you learn more by getting kind of those close-up shots and some of that nuanced stuff from film that you don't see, especially if you're if you're back in the theater and you're watching just kind of those ensemble shots and you
Hmm.
can't see up close, you're going to miss some of the things
Yeah.
that you would see by what they do within a film.
Well, and there's a great example of that I have that when the second time I saw The Lion King, I was sitting at the back of the theater and I was sitting high up, like the highest you could be in the theater. And there's the scene where Nala and Simba are running through the bushes or running through the tall grass. And I don't know if you remember the way that they depict that on the stage is there's people walking with big pallets of grass on their head, and they're
Mm,
kind of walking in like formation, and then there are two people who are running and jumping with the Nala and Simba characters. And I remember the first time seeing it, like, oh, that looks really cool. Like, and I could tell that they were walking in between people and everything. But the second time I was up so high that it looked like a Pac-Man game to me. That it was just like a kind of like a diagram of like, oh yeah, here's where they're going to go next and everything. So you definitely do. You have different perspectives in live theater depending on where you were sitting. And there is another example, and I don't want to um, have the eye roll from any students or people listening. I am a big Cats fan. This is not Disney. I'm a big Cats fan, and we love Cats. The stage production, I'll always prefer that. But I was not completely opposed to the theatrical release as well, as much as everyone else. I mean, the negative reviews it received, we enjoyed that because it was just entertainment. And that to me is one example of, if you thought, like, if the critique of Cats was, well, this is kind of a weird story, that there's cats and they come out at night and they all have these stories and everything. Well, that was the stage production. I never understood the stage production, the story of the stage production. I just always liked it because of the dancing and the music. The movie actually told more of a story than the stage production to me. I watched the movie and thought, okay, see, I know a little bit more about this particular character or this particular situation.
that's
And
that's a
so,
good example. Yeah,
yeah,
I hadn't thought about that, but you're absolutely right. I saw Cats when I was in high school, and I hate to admit it, but I mean, it was a long day of anyway, I fell asleep in the first act, but I didn't, yeah, I came out of there kind of thinking, yeah, the music's good, but but you're absolutely right. When you watch the movie, you can follow the story more. Um, and yeah, I mean, my take on things with, remakes and films and things like that, somebody had mentioned that to me one time. How many times have you seen Romeo and Juliet? You've seen it millions of times by different directors. You still keep watching it. It's just it's interesting to watch how different directors take this material and present it. I think that's the same with remakes.
Mhm.
The Cats movie, as an example, is it's interesting to see people's takes on similar stories,
Yeah,
and you just got to keep an open mind to it. I think, I
yeah.
try to.
And so then, transitioning from theater to the theatrical, um, let's talk about those products that are made solely for theatrical release, like the Greatest Showman. something like that that was made and shot for the movie theater. The It seems like you go back 20, 30 years ago, there were maybe even more. There were a lot of musicals that were in movie theaters. And then we kind of had what seems like kind of a downturn a little bit. Not as many people were watching. Now there's sort of been a revival of these types of movies. What is the appeal to the general public of these types of movie productions, you think?
I think they're fun. I look at something like La La Land I brought up earlier, and that's just a fun, or Greatest Showman. They're just fun, entertaining films, and I think when you know, I have fun watching them, and it's regardless of whether or not it's a stage adaptation, because neither of those are. Um, it's just it's multiple. It's a multiple, you know, facets of entertainment within
Mm-hmm.
one film, because there's dancing, there's singing, there's the acting. So um, I just it's interesting why they're, when you have those periods where they don't come out with them, why they aren't there. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of wondered that, because yeah, you have this kind of resurgence where you're seeing them, which I think is great, because the more you know, the more variety we have in the cinema, to me, the better. But yeah, I always wondered why, when they had those periods where you didn't have them,
Mm-hmm.
you wonder why. But it could be, you know, maybe it's a generational thing too. So you get a group of folks that are brought up on musicals, and then as they get older, once they have their kids are old enough to watch musicals, and you get kind of a resurgence. And I mean, it could be kind of cyclical that way. That's
Yeah.
just, you know, I don't know, but um,
The
but I think, yeah, I think it just comes down to their fun.
yeah.
I think it's, yeah.
And you know, one thing that Disney has done is they obviously have their animated movies that um, they make into musicals. And I remember one, it wasn't a point of contention, I don't believe, but one uh, point of emphasis when Pixar first started making full length features is they said we're not going to have a musical. Like we're not going to do the musical format like other studios have done. And they were talking about Disney because of their relationship with Disney at the time before, you know, being purchased by Disney. But um, another thing that Disney has done is they have their Disney Channel productions that they have many musicals on there, and several have been pretty big hits. I mean, and launched careers for a lot of people. And Disney's very good at making sure this person is in this show and this person is putting out records and they're going to be in this
Mhm.
new musical. I'm thinking, and the latest example I can think of is Meg Donnelly being in American Housewife, and then she was going to be in Zombies and Zombies 2 on the Disney Channel. And I can't remember um, the person who acted um, was her kind of love interest in the Zombies movies. But before those movies came out, that person, or right around that time, that person actually made an appearance in the television show American Housewife. They're really good at that.
Mhm.
And why do you think they make so many musicals for the Disney Channel format?
Well, I think it's a lot of it is the synergy that they try to produce. And you mentioned you know, releasing records and shows. You had that with Selena Gomez. You had that back with Demi Lovato, the Jonas Brothers. All these groups that they would have do me. And this goes back to the new Mickey Mouse Club, when you
Mm-hmm.
had, you know, Justin Timberlake and Britney Spears and Carrie Russell and all of them. Uh, it's gives them the ability to make make money from record sales, from television, advertising, all of these things. The more dimensions one actor can bring to something, the more opportunities they have
Mhm.
for selling things. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a company, right? So they try to do it that way. But I also think it's the segment of folks that they're selling to like music, they like the
Yeah.
arts, they like those sorts of things. So they're super popular. I mean, um, I've watched a ton of these, and I've liked pretty much every one, from original High School Musical, the Camp Rock series, to Teen Beach Movie, to Descendants. You and I talked about that,
Mhm.
off camera, Descendants. And yeah, it's the market, the people that are watching that are interested in it. Plus, it gives them the opportunity to make money,
Yeah.
from multiple places.
Well, and that synergy that you're talking about and being able to market different things, um, they're also building up quite a fan base from people early on who are watching Disney Channel and sort of in a way grow up with the Disney Channel. And it seems like a lot of groups, like a lot of age groups, would have their musical on the Disney Channel that they could grow up with. Similar to, in the early to mid 2000s, uh, High School Musical, the 2010s, the Descendants. It's almost like when I watch those stories, I could see, okay, if a person started watching this when they're 11 or 12 or whatever, then by the time they grow up and by the time that second or third movie comes out and they finish the story, they are the approximate age as these people that they're seeing on screen, which I think is a really neat thing. It's similar to other franchises that
Hmm.
non-musical franchises. Um, but on the Disney Channel, from the Disney Channel musicals, is there something that has stood out to you? You think it, you prefer your favorite, or you think was maybe the best done?
Oh, um, my favorite, probably, of all the ones that I've seen, may be Camp Rock 2.
Okay.
I really liked. Um, the Descendants, the original Descendants, because it was a bit it was different,
Yeah.
because a different take on the kind of fairy tale thing. Um, and the Teen Beach Movie ones I thought were
Okay.
really fun, especially the first one.
Okay.
So, but if I had to pick one, and it could just be the way, a certain age my son was at the time that we all watched it together. It was Camp Rock 2,
Okay.
because you had the Jonas Brothers, you had Demi Lovato. The music was really good, and yeah. So,
Okay. And another thing that I want to talk about with sticking to kind of um, production or silver screen and to the small screen before we get into talking about other productions and theme parks and things is it seemed mid 2000s there was kind of this trend for dramas to have one episode where they would have the musical episode.
mm,
Once
yeah.
Upon a Time did it. Scrubs did it a long time ago, but um, that it almost seemed like that was here's the here's the question. Do you think that was they shot those episodes because they were catering to people who liked those type of episodes, or do you think that was an attempt to bring people into musical theater and musical representation who because they had already been watching these popular shows?
Oh boy, I think, to me, it seemed like they were catering to people. that like the show, that already, the like the musical thing. The Once Upon a Time one, uh, especially. I mean, I just think, I don't know, seemed contrived at the time a bit. And there were a couple of good songs in it, but um, yeah, I mean, I don't know that they maybe some of the intention was to try to bring some people in. If you've got, especially Once Upon a Time, you've got, how many seasons of that, and it was kind of
Yeah.
stagnating and things, but that was done towards the end of the series.
Yeah.
Um, so,
Which I
some
thought
of the,
that one was really interesting. That was seasons. I didn't watch it when it was on television. I recently watched all of the series, and that was done like with maybe 2 episodes left in season 6,
yeah,
and then season 7 was almost like a whole different story.
there was the Seattle one, right
Yeah,
there, or what? Yeah, yeah,
and they ended. You could tell they were ending up the whole series because at that last episode they brought everybody back to Storybrooke and brought everybody back to the same place, and a lot of characters showed up again. But yeah, I thought that musical episode, it was interesting that it showed up where it did in the series. But you were saying something else as well. Sorry.
uh, yeah. I don't. No, I think we covered it.
Okay.
Uh,
So then the next thing that I want to talk about, and kind of the last thing before we talk about Disney Plus, is the live performances that you can see whether you go on a Disney cruise or whether you go to some of the theme parks. The Nemo musical, the Lion King musical. That some of these productions that are just, they're so well done that what what impact do you think those productions have on people who visit theme parks, go on the Disney cruise lines, that are not necessarily musical theater fans?
yeah, this is where I think, we've talked about the other things, whether they're catering to a group or bringing in new fans. This is where I think you really start to see new fans, because you're in a theme park, and this is even when, going back when I was a kid, going to the Six Flags parks and things like, where
Mm-hmm.
we'd have shows, and you go see a show because you've been walking around all day or whatever. And I think, you do that at the Disney parks, and you see that it's such a high quality, and it is Broadway-esque. You've got a lot of these performers there that could be on Broadway, that are,
Yeah.
that good. And the quality of the shows are that good, and especially on the cruise lines, where it's really Broadway adjacent
Yeah.
almost, because it really is that good. I think you're gonna see new fans coming out of those, as a result, especially younger ones. You want to take a break from the heat or walking around all day, so you go see a show, and you're introduced to this style of
Yeah.
storytelling, and it's really, yeah, I think that's where you see some new fans being converted into the musical theater area.
Okay. And um, is there is there something you've seen in a theme park or on a cruise line that stands out to you?
um I think the Festival of the Lion King definitely is a standout at Animal
Okay.
Kingdom.
Okay.
I mean, there's been other shows. There's a Mickey and the Magical Paintbrush, I think, out at in Disneyland, that is just a story that incorporates Mickey Mouse, but it's got all the kind of the classic, um, not classic, but the Pocahontas, Tangled, all the music from
Okay.
kind of those more recent musicals being sung as part of that introduces, you know, kids to these things. But um, in California Adventure, they've brought in, they had an Aladdin show and then a Frozen show that are also, it's kind of this huge theater that's kind of like a Broadway theater.
Yeah.
And you do that as part of what you're doing as your attractions, and they're that good
Yeah.
that they really are, you know would make you really interested in seeing more of those kinds of stories.
Yeah. So then transition to Disney Plus. And because we have Disney Plus now, we have so much content that we can watch, and it has opened the doors to this just greater array of um, or the different genres that people can watch. And one of those is musicals, Broadway musicals, the animated, the Disney Channel made for theaters. And so, what do you think? What's the impact of Disney Plus been on musical theater fans, but also on the general consumer?
I think that musical theater fans are going to go seek those shows out. So, I don't know if they would not have purchased Disney Plus. I think there's a huge intersection there of Disney fans and musical theater fans. Um, so I don't know that they would have sought out or if they would have purchased Disney Plus because of the musical theater
Mm-hmm.
content. But they're definitely going to seek out the shows that are on there. I think one of the first things I watched on Disney Plus was Sound of Music,
Mm-hmm.
which was obviously not, it was part of the Fox acquisition, but still it's there. And we've watched, Hamilton and and Newsies and all the other ones. Um, for folks that you asked about, people that are both people that are musical theater fans and people that aren't, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it's another one of those cases where, you go on to any of these services, Netflix, Disney Plus, and you just kind of surf. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't know what you're going to watch, you surf around. And especially with something like Hamilton that's had so much buzz, if you aren't even really familiar with what it is, your curiosity, it's free, it's
Yeah.
part of the service, so you're gonna turn it on. I think you'll definitely see people that are going to watch these things because they're on Disney Plus. um, I've watched some of the National Geographic content on Disney Plus that I wouldn't ordinarily have
Yeah.
watched probably if it hadn't been on Disney Plus. So I think you're going to see the same thing with the musicals.
Yeah. Yeah. So then, by way of sort of the rapid questions that we asked last time about the parks and your preferences for the parks and things like that, we'll kind of do that now, um, but we'll focus on the musical aspect of it. So,
Sure.
um, looking at Disney Plus, and I'm pulling up my Disney Plus app, but looking at the musical genre or on the Disney Plus app. Um, can you give me a top five of musicals on Disney Plus that like your top five, your must watch?
For me, Newsies is going to be the top of the list.
Okay.
Newsies is probably my all-time favorite musical. Going back to the movie, I was one of the few that liked the original movie. I think probably more than a few. If it was only a few, they wouldn't have made the Broadway musical out of it. So Newsies, Hamilton for sure, because it's just so groundbreaking. Uh, just looking through the list myself because there's so many good ones. Um, I mean, Sound of Music has to be up there. We watch Sound of Music at least once a year. Mary Poppins,
Mhm.
and boy, I mean, I don't know that I can choose between uh, all of the animated films as musicals. So I will stick to actual musical
Okay.
movies that are not the animated ones, and I will put um, scrolling through the list. I will put Into the Woods as my
Okay.
fifth one. I think that's five.
Yeah. Yeah. I and you mentioned one that we haven't even talked about, um, Mary Poppins, and the music from Mary Poppins being as iconic, at least as iconic as a lot of the music from the animated classics. Um, and just, then you also talk about the story of apparently what it was like at the studios when that was being made. A lot of, it was a happy time, things like that. Um, and then you add to the lore with the movie Saving Mr. Banks,
Hmm.
where you see like maybe not everything was as rosy as maybe people believed, but just that like presence that movie has, I think, is so strong for Disney fans. Um, and so I'm glad you mentioned that one, because it put me on a train of thought looking at Mary Poppins. And so here's one that may be extremely difficult, and if you can't do it, that's fine. But um, is there a particular is there like a top 5 list of songs that stands out to you from Disney musicals that are like, I mean, I'm thinking of one or two from Mary Poppins as like off the top of my head.
Yeah, boy. First of all, interesting story about I always like this about Mary Poppins. Um, the so you take the Saving Mr. Banks, where you learn about that she was not P.L. Travers was not
Mm-hmm.
happy with that. Then they approached her to make the musical about, of Mary Poppins, the stage musical, and she had made an arrangement that she sold the rights to the musical, but the only stipulation was that Disney nor anyone who was involved in the film of Mary Poppins could be involved in the
Hmm.
production, in the stage production. She passes away. A month later, Disney buys the rights to it and creates a stage musical.
Hmm.
So that's just an interesting,
Hmm.
epilogue to
Yeah.
the Save Mr. Banks story, which she'd probably be rolling over in her grave if she knew that. But
Yeah.
it's typical of that relationship. Anyway, back to your songs. So top 5 songs. Oh yes. I think, I See the Light is probably one of those songs. It's right up there with um, A Whole New World as far
Mm-hmm.
as emotional impact for me from Disney animated films. Um, yeah, there's so many um, in Mary Poppins, and I wouldn't even know where to start. I mean,
Yeah.
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious is a great with those ensemble ones. Having acted as in the show in our theaters as George Banks, the um, I'm trying to remember the actual name of the song, but it's, um, the one when he's singing about the precision and order around the
Oh,
house.
yeah. Yeah.
I don't know why I'm having a brain meltdown here, but yeah. So, like you said, Mary Poppins, you could probably pick any one of those. But boy, that is such a so many great songs. Boy, oh boy. Uh, I think Santa Fe from Newsies is another one of
Okay.
those that I guess, I mean, a lot of those ballads from Mencken and Ashman are just uh, are just fantastic. But then you've got, the from Moana.
Mhm.
Is it one that was nominated? Um, I can't remember the name of that one either. Um, the one where she's singing and she's on the boat, and it's kind of uh,
Yeah.
her
Yeah.
song.
I can't remember the title, but
Yeah,
I remember the song, just not the title of it.
yeah. And there's boy, yeah. I mean, When You Wish Upon a Star.
Yeah.
The So many of those, and the all the Roger Miller songs from Robin Hood.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a huge Roger Miller fan, so those are all good. Out There from Hunchback,
Yeah.
or boy, I that is a that is
I
tough to limit to just 5.
well, and that's I figured it would turn into just a long and growing list. And while you were listing those, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I didn't even think of that one. I didn't think of that one. It makes me think of this one. And one movie that wasn't mentioned is Mary Poppins Returns.
Yes.
That, I mean, the music from that is was really really good, and that's actually within like I probably sing more of that now than I do like the old songs, except for Supercalifragilistic or um, so there are just so many wonderful songs. So yeah, that was a
I
setup to
was
try to get into
really,
the
I,
list.
yeah, I was really happy with Mary Poppins Returns.
I was
Um,
too. That was because I remember. I mean, I read a lot about how happy it was when Mary Poppins was made, and kind of a idealistic time or whatever. And so when Mary Poppins Returns came out, I remember going and thinking, hey, I'm lucky that I'm going to see a Mary Poppins movie when it is being released. This is what people must have felt like that saw the original Mary Poppins.
yeah, it had all the, it was it was a feel good film. And because you had a lot of parallels between, from songs between this one and the other one. You had the lamplighter thing, which was kind of like their step in time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was, the one song, I think it's called The Conversation, where
Yes.
he's
Yeah.
up in the attic, right, and going through
Yes.
everything. And that's just there's so many songs that just kind of rip your rip your heart out, for lack
Yeah.
of a better.
The A Cover Is Not the Book is the song
Oh
that
yes.
probably gets played the most
Yeah, and
around
all
here.
of those are P.L. Travers books.
Yeah.
Those which I thought was really kind of cool.
Yeah. And so the last question on this is kind of a two-parter, but of all of the musicals that are out there, um, that now have been either made by Disney, purchased by Disney via the Fox acquisition, that are not on Disney Plus, what would you most like to see on Disney Plus that's not already on there, musical wise?
Things that are owned by Disney but are not on Disney Plus.
Yeah, things that could be put on Disney Plus, either because they were made by Disney or they've now been purchased. What would you like to most see on there?
Oh, that is a good question because I don't know what's not on there. Um, who who did La La Land?
I
I
can't
don't think.
remember who did La La Land, but I mean, we can open it
Yeah,
up to kind of dream if Disney could, because my background, Disney purchased the rights to Hamilton. That,
that's
if
true.
Disney
Yeah,
could
so it's
purchase
just
the rights to something, what would you like to see on Disney Plus?
oh yeah, these are harder than Disney fan questions. Good grief. Um, if I because I noticed like Hello Dolly's out there on
Yes. Yeah.
Disney Plus, which is kind of cool. And I didn't know that till I was scrolling through, because that was obviously one of the things that was acquired. But there's so many of those classic ones that you know you'd love to see on there. I mean, I mentioned the Music Man and some of these other ones. Um, what would be cool is, so you're doing a revival or they're doing a revival of the Music Man. We'll take that as an
Mm-hmm.
example. Hugh Jackman is going to be
Mm-hmm.
in that. It is going to be phenomenal when that opens on Broadway. I would love
Yes.
to see a treatment of that done like they did with Hamilton,
Yeah.
and that to show up.
Okay.
Something like that um, would be great to see. Um, La La Land I looked up as Lionsgate. I think
Okay.
I don't know what studio or what streaming service would have that, but
Okay.
probably HBO, I would imagine, more than likely. But anyway, but as far as like shows that are out there now that that would be great to see. Um, I would like to see one thing I would like to see them do is Hercules. So they just did
Yeah.
I think it was in Central Park, like the smallish version of Hercules that um, that did really well. It was a couple of weekends, um, and the I'd love to see them turn that into something
Okay.
that's bigger. Or Hunchback.
Mm-hmm.
Hunchback, they did. It never made it to Broadway, um, but it was um, much darker than the animated one. It was more like the book, from what I
Okay.
understand. So I haven't seen the stage show. It was here in Seattle last year before everything closed down. But I've listened to the Broadway soundtrack, so it's a lot darker than the animated film. I'd love to see them make um, a stage musical and put
Yeah.
put that on.
Okay. Well, and one of the musicals I was thinking of is Music Man, because that was one of the first ones I watched. It was one of the first ones that I learned the music to, learned the songs to, and would sing it, albeit horribly. And excuse me. So I would like to see that old Music Man, the original movie version of Music Man on there. And then I also would like to see some type of treatment, like you said, of the new stage revival that's going to have Hugh Jackman in it, because I think, he's just an amazing stage actor who made a great transition from stage to screen, and back and forth as needed.
That's
Um,
one that when things open up again, I would actually entertain a trip to New York just to go see if I can see that.
yeah, yeah. Well, and so thank you for talking to us about as many topics as I could think of to talk about Disney musicals. Is there anything else you think is important for people watching or listening to know about musical theater and kind of its impact?
The one thing I have to say that if you enjoy musical theater at all, if you like watching it in on stage in the movies, go check out when things open up again, your local theaters. Some of the best musicals I've
Mm,
seen versions have come from local theaters, and it's really interesting to see what they do with certain stage sizes. We
mm,
have a local theater, it's got a super small stage, but they did Mary Poppins, and they have the ensemble with the chimney sweeps and all that. It's a really creative way of uh, of doing that. So um, support your local theaters, because you'll be entertained just as much as you will be if you go to Broadway or watch a film. So and there's some really good local talent out there.
yeah, and that's actually one of the best or most fun times going to the theater I've had is when we had a subscription to our regional theater, because they did Mary Poppins as well. And I remember watching that and thinking, oh my goodness, how did they do this with the stage, the set design and everything? It was so great. So um, for people who want to reach out and they have questions or want to follow what you're doing with the show, what's the best way for somebody to reach out to you or follow you?
Well, our podcast, Heilman and Haver, and you can search. We're on iTunes, Spotify, Pandora, basically everywhere you can find podcasts. Um, you can search on us out there. On Facebook, it's Heilman and Haver. You can search just um, one, Heilman, the word, and Haver. We're on YouTube as well, so all of our podcast episodes are on YouTube. Plus, we've got some other videos. We do in the mix segment, a video every couple of weeks where we mix cocktail and talk about a certain topic. Um, Last week was all about Danny Bilson. So so from talking about his screenwriting of The Rocketeer, growing up in Hollywood, and all of that. And then we did In the Mix, where we talked about some of the things that other things he's done in his career. So we're also Heilman and Haver at gmail.com if you just want to reach out to us via email. So
All
we're
right.
out there, not too hard to find.
Well, and thank you again. This was a lot of fun. Thanks for answering a lot of questions and just talking about Disney musicals and raising more conversation on the topic.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me. I'm always happy to come back and talk about anything Disney or anything else entertainment wise. So,
Perfect. Thank you very much.
all right.
Have a
Thanks,
good
Cody.
rest of the day.
All right. You too.
Bye.